it's not perfect, and it's not going to be perfect, and I don't even want it to be perfect. I feel like perfection is overrated. Sometimes you don't feel the immediate bond. There's no special, it's not supposed to be like right after birth. There's no formula to it. That's what I want to say. Oh, did you have a vaginal birth or a C-section, was like the first thing people ask me, instead of just asking me, how are you
feeling?
Welcome to Tiny Tales,
Where we explore the unique experience
that giving birth is to every woman.
we will hear the personal tales of women in Ghana who will take us on their journeys
To motherhood, from conception to birth, to the first 3 months after the baby is born.
This season is sponsored and co-hosted by Gaia Organic.
Your plug for fresh, healthy organic food in Jawolo, Accra. Hi, my name is Lisa and I'll be your host. Today I'm talking to Ruth, mother of Ranell, age 3, and also an addictions counselor, and the story of how she had a very supportive family. Thank you for joining us here on the couch and for your birth story. I wanted to just start by asking you, was Ranell planned?
Yes, he was planned.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And then how was the pregnancy for you? A lot of moms experience in the first trimester a lot of fatigue and nausea. And how was it for you?
Yes, I experienced nausea. I didn't read much about pregnancy, so everything was very new to me. Although I had spoken to my sister about how her experience was, I was very easily irritable. And so there are scents that I was particularly annoyed by, and I was also particularly annoyed by traffic. So those are the things that stood out for me.
We can all relate to that one.
Yeah.
And what about, wow, so then you go into second trimester, third trimester. Did you have any physical or emotional issues or mental things that happened to you?
Emotionally, I was sad. Like every little thing could get me to cry. I think that was one of the things. The hormones were at its peak, and so little things like that. I remember I had an argument with my husband about a parking spot, and to this day I really don't know what happened, but I just got so upset because he had parked in my parking spot.
I wanted to ask you, as somebody who also is in the mental health space, we have a lot of moms, and even myself when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had a lot of fear of losing her. Yes. I had a lot of fear that she was, I had the sole responsibility to make sure that she was feeling okay, because I was the only one who could tell, if she was moving or not moving. And throughout these conversations, I've learned that fear is something that lingers with a lot of pregnant moms. So maybe you can, from sort of an expert perspective, tell us a little bit about what is that fear and why do we have that?
I think for us, because we're carrying a child and it's either a new experience or maybe a second or third experience, it's normal to have that fear. We are talking more about this fear that almost all mothers have now than before. For me, the fear was more like I'd seen cases of women who would show up at the hospital and then be told that the baby had died in their bellies. So all these things compounded with a lot of things that could happen would create a lot of fear. So the fear is valid. It's just that now there's more education, there's more awareness. So when you go to the hospital, your fear is valid. I did a number of ultrasounds. Half of them weren't necessary, but because I was afraid, I would just the reassurance at these ultrasounds, I would go there and they would say everything is fine, and I just needed that reassurance. So I think it's normal to have those fears.
I did the same. I did a lot of extra trips to the hospital to have her heart monitor done, because I was, they say, I think it's after 5 months, they say you have to feel the baby every day, and then I wasn't feeling her every day, and I was also going through a pretty stressful period, so I went to the hospital a few extra times, and I also went to more. I paid for extra ultrasounds to make sure that she was still in there, everything was fine.
Yeah.
So what about you when you came to the birth? Was it did it start naturally, or were you induced, or how did it go about?
So when it started on a Tuesday. I remember so clearly, 22nd of October, and I started feeling uncomfortable in my belly area. And my sister was around at that time, so she advised me that anytime I feel something that's off, I should just go and see the doctor. Okay. So I took a drive to see the doctor, and then the doctor also noticed that there was some irregularity with the heart rate. And so I was scheduled to come in the next day to do further assessment. And so in the further assessments, when they realized that the heart rate was dropping, so like rather at an unusual rate, so I had to just be rushed in to have a cesarean section. I didn't plan for it, but because of what I was feeling and being afraid that it's my first baby, I want my baby to be fine, I absolutely just did what I thought was best in that moment.
So when you think back on it now, how do you feel about the birth? Do you have any lingering thoughts or feelings about it?
The one thing I felt that I I think about is I didn't immediately bond with my baby. I was so tired and exhausted, and as when they brought my baby out and I saw him, he was crying, and he was a big baby. So they showed him, they took a picture of him, and I said, okay, he's fine. And then they were like, do you want to hold your baby up? And I was like, no, just keep him there. He's fine. And so I look back at that time, and I kind of wish I had had him by me and snuggled, but I also know very well that I was tired, and in that moment there wasn't much I could do. So
yeah. And that's actually another thing that's come up a lot in these conversations is moms feel bad sometimes about not having the immediate connection because you're supposed to be in this baby bubble and everything is just great and pink and beautiful, and it's just not for everybody. It takes a while for some people to connect, to feel the love, and even to identify as being a mom. And I know for me the latter one, I feel like for me the responsibility came immediately. Like I knew she was mine to take care of. And then I think a couple of days later the overwhelming love came. But the identity of actually identifying as a mom took probably a year. It took a long time where people would be like, oh, that's your daughter. I'll be like, oh yeah, I guess she's my daughter. And I was spending every waking moment with her. But even that, and saying that you're now her mom, that took me a while.
Yeah.
And I'm understanding from these stories that I'm definitely not the only one who felt this, and you also had the experience. So what happens there? And is this normal for people to feel this?
It is absolutely normal. Sometimes you don't feel the immediate bond. There's no special, it's not supposed to be right after birth. There's no formula to it. That's what I want to say. It can happen a few weeks, a few hours, or even a few months after.
Yeah.
So just being gentle with yourself as a new mom and just allowing that love to gradually grow is what has helped me. And then the recognition too is important. The awareness that it's not happening for everybody at the same time.
Yeah.
It takes at different paces, but we all get there. So I think that's the reassurance.
Yeah. But does it mean that a mom who doesn't feel a connection immediately, is there something wrong with her? Does she have a postpartum depression?
So no, immediately the connection might not be there, but it doesn't mean she immediately has postpartum depression. I believe, and I'm a strong advocate of mothers having an assessment maybe 5 to 6 weeks, or even after childbirth, so they can assess what's happening with them with a psychologist to see what's going on. Because sometimes you can have the baby blues, or sometimes it's just a period where you're feeling your hormones are all going back to where they were, and then so you just need that period to settle down, and then maybe after that, if it lingers on, then you can have a professional assessment and see what's actually going on. So I'm a huge advocate of that, getting checked before and after.
Yeah. First 3 weeks of my baby's life, I definitely struggled. I was like, this is a lot. And also because my husband went back to work 2 days after, and I was just alone with this little baby, and I had no idea what I was doing. And there was so much responsibility. And I remember after the first week, a nurse came to my house and asked me how I was doing. And I just started crying when she asked me that question, because I was I was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But then after, then we got into a flow and we figured out. So I definitely I don't think I had postpartum depression. I had a reaction to having a baby and having my life change completely. But I think that's not necessarily postpartum. Is that? Yeah.
Yes, like you're saying. So that period, it might not be postpartum depression, but being easy on yourself and saying, okay, let me be professionally assessed. Let's see what's going on. For some people, after that period, they bond and then everything goes back to normal. For some people, it lingers on for a period of time, and that's where I think having a professional assess you is important.
Yeah.
The other thing too that I feel like it's important is having a support group. I would go online after I had my baby. I would go online and then be looking for support groups, because I just wanted to be in a company of other women who had kids, and maybe our baby's just crawling around, but us having a conversation. I really was looking for something like that, and I would have paid to be part of even a support group like that. I really wanted something like that.
I agree. We in my home country, we actually have Facebook groups for people who are due in a certain date of a certain month of every year.
Yeah.
So I'm part of the group of everybody who was due in that same month. So we started. I mean, you can join whenever you want. So I joined when I was still pregnant, and it was so nice to have a community of women who are exactly the same place as me. They were in the first semester when I was, and their babies are now the same age, more or less. So we still are active in this group. We're still using each other for sparring and advice. And it's so nice for people who are in the same place as you are.
Yes, I agree. It's so helpful.
Yeah. And then about the birth. So in your situation, it became was that classified as an emergency C-section because it sort of went that way?
It was, because also I had a condition where I had hemorrhoids. So I had really bad hemorrhoids. So I was assessed for that as well. And the fact that everything going on with the baby's heart rate. So yes, it wasn't the plan, but I just had to do it at the time.
Yeah. For some women coming out of the birth, there's a lot of trauma that lingers.
Yes.
But you go through life and then baby's taking over all your time and you don't think about it. But I'm learning that then a lot of moms sort of reconnect with it when they're pregnant again. It's like their body remembers.
Yes.
Even if they put it in the back of their minds, their body remembers. And there is, I think you can talk about that some people go through a trauma from giving birth. So women who have done, who feel, who have a lot of strong emotions about it, and maybe they don't even want to talk about it or think about it because it's so strong. What do you tell to them? What do you tell them? Because we're told all the time that giving birth, we all do it, and it's easy, it's fine, it's natural, like all this, but it's not necessarily.
Yeah.
And we have to make space for the people who don't find it that way. So how do you tell somebody? What would you advise somebody who has had a traumatic birth?
I would say if there's a capacity for them to go to a safe space to share to a professional or to a group, that they should, once you feel safe and supported enough to do so, because the trauma sometimes, like you're saying, it lives with us, it's in our bodies. I quite remember there was one time I was thinking about having a second child, and I remembered how it felt when I had my baby and the pain that I went through, and the nurses' pressure to breastfeed, and then I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm not ready, because I don't want to relive that right now. It's work that you have to do on yourself, and then when you get to a place where you're like, you know what, I feel like I'm good, I feel like I'm at a place where I can have another child. But it's something we need to address when you're comfortable enough. Some people don't want to talk about it immediately, and that's okay. I feel like once they're ready to talk about it and share and seek the support, they should, so they can, get over that phase and then move on.
I mean, I've heard that it could be helpful to sit down with the midwife who was with you during the whole birth, because she could tell you things that you don't remember, but you remember the feeling. You remember feeling this wasn't right, there was something off, but you don't know exactly what happened because everything happened so quickly, and there was pain, and there was a lot of things going on. So do you recommend that you sit down with a midwife afterwards who was present at the birth?
I do recommend that. I think I've said this with my friends before, that having an advocate is so important. Somebody who's there with you. Some people have midwives, some people have doulas, some people have all these people who are there with them, and it's important to reconnect with those people. Like you're saying, you forget certain details in the birth story, and then it's nice to be reminded of these things. So I think it's helpful to have them share and reconnect and see some of the things. So
they can tell you from that other perspective of what actually happened.
Absolutely. And then it helps you kind of show yourself more compassion that way, because sometimes we in our own heads can be so hard on ourselves, but when you hear from somebody else who was there with you, you're like, oh, I need to extend some grace to myself.
I have a feeling from my birth that I was bad at giving birth, but when I hear other people's stories, I realize that mine wasn't necessarily even that long, and it just took forever to dilate. And you're supposed to do, they say, like maybe a centimeter an hour or something, but mine took much longer than that. And then they wanted to up my drip. Like I'd been induced, and they wanted to up my drip so I can have even more contractions to get this baby out. And I was just like, I told them no. I was like, you can't up my drip. I don't have the energy. I've been around doing this for too long now. I wanted an epidural. So I told them that, and I could just have this feeling, and I actually never went back and talked to the midwives afterwards, but I have this memory of them looking at me like, okay, she's weak. Like that's the feeling I'm left with after that. And then we got to the pushing phase, and that was pretty awesome, because then that felt great, because you're like doing something, it's leading to somewhere, and you're like, and I felt like a power woman who was just screaming like a bear, and like my baby was out in a few pushes. That was really awesome. But when I think of that first part, I have this sort of like a bad memory from that sits in me, that I'm not good at giving birth.
I think it takes, like I always say, doing the work for ourselves, like realizing that you did this awesome thing. We have the tendency to focus on a particular part of the journey and then like fixate on, oh, I didn't do this, but it's not a perfect journey. It's not going to be perfect. We can't calculate every possibility of it with the birth story. I don't think it's possible. It's helpful to have a birth plan, but it may not even go according to the birth plan. So I think being gentle with ourselves, I'm always advocating compassion, self-compassion, as a mother, as a wife, as an individual for yourself, and that helps you to remove that criticism that you may have about yourself, or your inner critic saying you didn't do this well, you didn't do that well. Just being compassionate with yourself really helps, because as a mother, there's so many things you're doing that are like, you're doing so well, but we don't recognize that. Like, you pushed, you did all this, and we are focusing on the one part where, you feel some criticism. But I think as moms, we have a lot of feelings around that we're never good enough. We never do well enough. So if we bring it back to your story, so how was it taking Ranell home? Because I think it can be a little anxiety-ridden taking a small baby home. You're like, I don't have a driver's license for this. I don't know how to do this. Are you sure that you're trusting me to do this? How did you feel taking him home? I felt very protective. That much I know. I was like this mama bear. But what I realized was people were more concerned with, oh, did you have a vaginal birth or a C-section, was like the first thing people asked me instead of just asking me, how are you
feeling?
Yeah, and I really got emotional one time where somebody asked me, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm fine. And then she's like, no, how are you? And then I was like, okay, since you asked.
Yeah, that's right. Let me give you all I got.
Yeah, then I broke down and shared the details, and I find
Yeah.
that most women, like, it's a first question thing where it's like people are not really concerned about how you are. It's more like, sometimes people visit you and it's like, oh, how's the baby? And
Yeah.
like the mother is like sideline, and it's all about the baby. So I think the period after you have a baby and you take the baby home, I think there should be more supports too for the mother and her mental health, and also like for the child as well. But like as Gloria had mentioned earlier, once your cup is full, you're able to pour from your cup. But when your cup is empty, it's like you're running on zero.
Yeah.
And it's
There's
difficult.
nothing you can give.
Yes, there's nothing you can give. So that was.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of insecurity actually in like becoming a mom, having to take care of the baby. And then what a lot of moms do is that they take on the whole responsibility and don't let their partner take care of anything. I mean, I know of course as moms, if we're breastfeeding is a big part of the first few months. But there's also the tummy time, and there is changing a diaper, there's sleeping, because I mean, it's not all surrounded around the breast, right? But still, a lot of moms take on the responsibility. So what happens there? Like, what do you think the moms do that?
Personally, when I had my baby, I felt like, well, I pushed him out. I know everything there is to know, and I know what's good for him. But gently allowing other people in that space to take care of him. Like my mom, I mean, she took care of me, and I'm fine. So why was I not feeling safe enough to give my son to him to change the diaper? I think it's just reaffirming to myself that he will be fine, you're okay. Like that affirmation for myself helped. Then I could easily give away power sort of to other people to take charge and to support. But I had to consciously remind myself to do that, because it didn't come naturally for me to just, because I had that, no, he's my baby, he's still mine. Reaffirming to yourself, it's okay, he's going to be fine. And I had anxiety every time he was asleep. I would constantly check to see if he's breathing. And
I still do that. My daughter's almost 2. Especially when she's sick. I do. She's sick right now. So the other day I was putting my hand on her back, because she's sitting on her belly, and I was just checking. She's still breathing.
Yes, I did that a lot, and I wouldn't sleep properly because of that. I would just wake up abruptly, just need to go check, is he breathing? Because I also heard a lot of cases where babies had passed in their sleep,
So SIDS, right?
Yes, SIDS, exactly. So I also so wary of that. So I think that was it too.
I had the same fear. But it's so funny because we feel all this, and all these sort of negative emotions, that we're tired, we're exhausted, we're also probably angry at our partner for not doing more. But at the same time, we don't want to give him the responsibility of doing more. It's weird. Why do we do that? I mean, we married this guy, so we believe that we had kids with him, so we must believe that he's good enough to do that. So why is it that we just don't give them the chance?
Like for me, like I was saying, it was more about telling myself, like, sometimes you want to, if you're used to doing things by yourself and you're taking responsibility, it will take time for you to let that go, like share that responsibility with your partner or with your mom or your sister. So just reminding yourself, oh, it's okay, mommy has taken. And I remember the first time I had to leave my baby and go out, I was just calling every second, every minute, is he okay? And after the first day, then it gets easier, like over time. And then, it gets easier to leave him with grandma or your husband or things like that. But it takes getting used to, and it takes also like affirming that he's going to be all right, telling yourself, like reassuring yourself, I think, for the most part, that your partner can handle. Like you're saying, like, we married him. We must believe that
they're capable of something.
Exactly. Like right now he's in daycare, but I still like call in, like, hey, how's he doing, things like that. I think we never let that go. We still have a connection with our babies, toddlers, I think it's normal. For us.
Responsibility, like that crazy sense of responsibility.
Yes, absolutely.
What did you learn from your experience that you would want to do again or not want to do again? What advice would you give to somebody?
I think for the important part for me is having a social support system. It takes a village, they say, and if you have a village, it's very helpful. I mean, so you can sleep, so you can refill your cup, so you can get exercise, get a healthy meal. I don't know how one person can do it all alone. So enlisting the support, even if you don't have your mother or father around, just having somebody you trust to just take the hold for a bit so you can rest is so important. And the thing that I wouldn't do too was not be too hard on myself. I don't think there's anything there's no perfect way to do it. It's not perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. And I don't even want it to be perfect. I feel like perfection is overrated. So just being gentle with yourself, more compassion. Tell yourself nice things as a mother. Like, we're doing such a good job, but we don't tell ourselves enough. So I feel like telling yourself, and then also telling other mothers too, because sometimes I notice that other mothers don't get told enough how amazing of a job you're doing. So if you're a mother, like, you're doing such an amazing job.
Thank you so much, Ruth. We really appreciate. I really took away, also definitely the support system. I've really used my support system as well. I couldn't, even now my baby's almost 2, I can't imagine not having this group of ladies I can talk to. And some of them actually just on Facebook. I don't even know them, but just having a safe space where I can go and share my feelings and thoughts, and sometimes even anonymously. That's kind of nice as well, because you don't always want to, like, some of these feelings, like, you don't feel too great about having them, So I think having that support system is so important.
Yes. And I would also like to add that we should try not to shame mothers. Some mothers can breastfeed, others may not be able to. Just not shaming mothers. Like, yes, we know exclusive breastfeeding is helpful, but some mothers, just if they have twins or triplets, it's a lot of work, and they may not be able to do. So not shaming mothers for this person breastfed, this person fed is best, I think.
I agree with you.
Just not
and the same with giving birth, C-section or vaginal. Absolutely fine. The baby just needs to come out.
Yes, absolutely. That's And once you see someone shaming another mother, I think it's safe to just, like, stop it in its root.
Cut it off.
Cut it off.
I definitely agree with you. Thank you so much, Ruth. And thank you to everybody watching at home. I'm sure there are parts of Ruth's story that you took away as well. Maybe you could see yourself in, like, having that. Maybe you do have a very strong support system, or maybe you don't, and you're thinking that maybe you need to. Or maybe you could see yourself in some of the fears and thoughts that we all have as well, and Ruth was explaining to us as well. No matter what, that's the power of the personal journey, the personal story, that we all relate to it differently. And thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everybody at home. We want to hear from you, and please leave us a comment in the section below. This show was created and hosted by Tiny Reuses.